Imagine you're in traffic. Someone cuts you off. Your heart races, your hands grip the wheel, and before you know it, you're honking, yelling, or shaking your head in frustration. The moment has passed, but the anger lingers. Now imagine the same situation, but instead of reacting, you take a breath, let the car pass, and keep driving. The event is the same, but your response is different. One drains you, the other frees you. Most people go through life reacting. Something happens, emotions take over, and without thinking, they respond with frustration, fear, or anxiety. It feels natural, even justified, but it rarely serves them well. Reactions come from impulse, not choice. They are driven by old patterns, emotional conditioning, and the illusion that every challenge demands an immediate answer. But in reality, the greatest power lies in doing nothing at all, at least not at first. Calm is power. It is the ability to observe, reflect, and decide how to respond rather than being pushed by circumstances. It is not passivity, weakness, or indifference. It is control. A calm mind doesn't mean an emotionless life. It means choosing which emotions deserve attention and which do not. When you stop reacting and start responding, everything changes. Your relationships improve, stress decreases, and problems that once seemed overwhelming become manageable. You stop wasting energy on things that don't matter. You gain clarity. Most people mistake calmness for suppression, but they are not the same. Suppression is forcing emotions down, pretending they don't exist. Calmness is understanding emotions, allowing them to surface, and then choosing what to do with them. Suppression leads to outbursts later. Calmness leads to strength. The difference is awareness, the ability to step back, pause, and see a situation for what it truly is. The reason people struggle to stay calm is simple. They think reacting is the only option. From childhood, they are taught to act fast, defend themselves, and respond immediately. When someone insults them, they feel the need to fire back. When life feels unfair, they complain or blame. When challenges arise, they panic. They are trained to react, not to reflect. But every reaction reinforces the idea that external events control their emotions. In reality, emotions are personal. They are habits shaped over time, and like any habit, they can be changed. Think about the last time you lost your temper. What caused it? Was it truly the event, or was it your interpretation of the event? Two people can experience the same difficulty. One becomes angry, the other remains composed. The difference is not the situation, but the mind. Those who react without thinking are at the mercy of circumstances. Those who respond with awareness are in control. A reactive mind is chaotic, always searching for threats, always on edge. It jumps from problem to problem, constantly feeling overwhelmed. It sees everything as personal. A calm mind is steady. It understands that most things are not urgent, that problems are not always personal, and that emotions do not need to dictate behavior. It does not mean ignoring reality, it means approaching reality with clarity. Emotional reactions are fast, but they are rarely wise. They come from deep-seated fears, insecurities, and habits formed over years of conditioning. Someone criticizes you and you feel attacked. Someone disagrees with you and you feel the need to argue. You make a mistake and you beat yourself up. These responses are automatic, but they are not necessary. They serve no real purpose except to drain energy and increase stress. The ability to respond rather than react is one of the most valuable skills in life. It creates better decisions, stronger relationships, and a sense of inner peace that cannot be shaken by external events. It allows you to handle challenges with patience rather than panic. It shifts power away from the outside world and puts it back in your hand. This is the essence of emotional mastery, not the absence of emotion, but the ability to direct it wisely. To develop this skill, you must first understand your own patterns. How do you typically react to stress? What triggers you? Where do you lose control? Self-awareness is the first step. Without it, change is impossible. Most people go through life unaware of their reactions, justifying them as natural responses to external events. But reactions are not inevitable. They are choices, and choices can be changed. The second step is learning to pause. Between every trigger and every reaction, there is a moment of choice. It may be brief, but it exists. The difference between reacting and responding is recognizing that moment and using it. Instead of snapping in anger, you pause. Instead of letting fear dictate your actions, you observe it. Instead of getting lost in frustration, you breathe. A pause does not mean inaction, it means intention. It is the space where control begins. The third step is reframing how you see challenges. Instead of viewing difficulties as threats, see them as opportunities to practice calmness. Life will always bring stress, setbacks, and disappointments. You cannot control that, but you can control how you meet them. A reactive mind sees problems as obstacles. A calm mind sees them as lessons. The situation does not change, but your experience of it does. Over time, this practice becomes second nature. The more you choose calm, the easier it becomes. The mind learns through repetition. Each time you pause instead of reacting, you build the habit of control. Each time you respond with patience, you reinforce emotional stability. It is not about perfection, it is about progress. Every moment offers a chance to practice. Calmness is not reserved for a select few. It is not a personality trait or an inborn gift. It is a skill. And like any skill, it can be trained. It starts with a single choice: to stop letting emotions control you and to start mastering them instead. This book is about that choice. It is about learning how to step back, think clearly, and respond with wisdom rather than impulse. It is about breaking old habits and creating new ones that serve you rather than sabotage you. It is about building a mindset that is unshaken by stress, immune to unnecessary drama, and strong enough to handle life's challenges with grace. The ability to stay calm in chaos is not just a tool, it is a superpower. And once you develop it, everything changes. Part 1: Understanding the Reactive Mind. Every action you take is either a reaction or a response. Reactions are automatic, emotional, and often impulsive. Responses are intentional, controlled, and thoughtful. Most people believe they are in control of their actions, but in reality, they are operating on deeply ingrained patterns developed over years of conditioning. These patterns dictate how they behave under stress, in conflict, and in uncertain situations. When something unexpected happens, the brain does not pause to analyze. It reacts based on past experiences and ingrained emotional triggers. This is why some people lash out in anger while others withdraw in silence. It has nothing to do with the situation itself and everything to do with how the mind has been trained. The reactive mind operates on survival instincts. It is fast, instinctual, and focused on short-term relief rather than long-term outcomes. This was useful in early human history when danger was a constant threat. When faced with a predator, hesitation could mean death. The ability to react quickly increased survival chances. But modern life does not require this level of immediate action. Most situations are not life-threatening, yet the brain continues to operate as if they are. When someone criticizes you, your brain perceives it as a threat. When you are running late, your body responds with stress as if you are in physical danger. The reactive mind is constantly scanning for threats, real or imagined, and responding with fight, flight, or freeze. This constant state of reactivity is exhausting. It drains energy, creates unnecessary stress, and leads to poor decisions. People who operate in this mode are easily triggered, emotionally unstable, and frequently overwhelmed. They struggle with patience, overanalyze minor issues, and feel powerless against their emotions. They mistake intensity for effectiveness, believing that reacting strongly means taking control, when in reality, it means losing it. A reactive person allows the external world to dictate their internal state. They feel good when things go their way and frustrated when they don't. Their mood is controlled by circumstances, and because circumstances are unpredictable, their emotional state is unstable. The difference between reacting and responding is awareness. A reaction happens without thought. A response happens after thought. The key is recognizing the gap between what happens and how you choose to handle it. This space exists in every situation, but most people move too fast to notice it. The reactive mind does not pause. It does not ask, "Is this worth my energy?" or "What is the best way to handle this?" It simply acts based on emotion. The calm mind does the opposite. It observes before acting. It recognizes the trigger, acknowledges the emotion, and then chooses how to proceed. It is not about suppressing emotions, but about directing them wisely. To understand reactivity, it is important to recognize its sources. The first is past experiences. Many reactions are not about the present moment at all. They are echoes of old wounds, disappointments, and fears. If someone was repeatedly criticized as a child, they might react defensively to any form of feedback, even when it is constructive. If someone experienced betrayal, they might react with distrust even when there is no real reason to. The mind connects present situations to past experiences, often without realizing it, leading to overreactions that have little to do with what is actually happening. The second source of reactivity is emotional conditioning. From a young age, people are taught to react in certain ways. They observe how those around them handle stress, conflict, and uncertainty, and unconsciously adopt similar behaviors. If they grew up in an environment where anger was the default reaction to problems, they are likely to mirror that pattern. If they were surrounded by avoidance, they might shut down instead of addressing challenges. These habits become so ingrained that they feel automatic. But automatic does not mean unchangeable. The third source is societal pressure. Modern culture encourages urgency. Fast decisions, instant responses, and quick fixes are valued over patience and thoughtfulness. Social media amplifies this by rewarding immediate engagement. People feel pressured to respond instantly to messages, to news, to opinions. The faster the reaction, the more engaged they seem. But speed is not intelligence. Many problems arise not because of the situation itself, but because of how quickly people respond without thinking. A poorly worded message, an angry reply, or a rushed decision can create unnecessary conflict simply because there was no pause to consider a better alternative. Breaking free from reactivity requires unlearning these patterns. It begins with recognizing that emotions are not instructions. Feeling anger does not mean you must lash out. Feeling fear does not mean you must retreat. Emotions provide information, but they do not control behavior unless you allow them to. The reactive mind assumes that emotions demand action. The calm mind understands that emotions simply pass through. You do not have to obey them. One way to shift from reaction to response is by creating space between stimulus and action. This means slowing down, even for a few seconds, to recognize what is happening before making a decision. When faced with a stressful situation, instead of reacting immediately, take a moment. This could be as simple as taking a breath, mentally labeling the emotion, or stepping back before speaking. This pause disrupts the automatic reaction and gives the logical mind a chance to engage. It may seem small, but over time, it changes everything. Another key is changing perspective. Many emotional reactions come from personalizing situations that are not personal. Someone cuts you off in traffic and you assume they are being disrespectful. A colleague disagrees with you and you interpret it as an attack. But most people's actions have little to do with you. They are reacting to their own situations, emotions, and stress. By shifting perspective, you remove unnecessary offense and emotional burden. Instead of assuming hostility, assume misunderstanding. Instead of assuming disrespect, assume distraction. This shift alone reduces stress and prevents unnecessary conflict. Reactivity thrives on assumption, urgency, and emotion. Calmness thrives on awareness, patience, and choice. The more you observe your reactions, the more control you gain over them. Instead of being carried by emotion, you start directing it. Instead of feeling powerless against circumstances, you start influencing them. This shift is not instant, but it is possible for anyone. It starts with awareness, recognizing reactive moments, understanding their origins, and creating space for a better response. Every small shift toward calmness is a step toward greater power. Part 2, the art of slowing down. Imagine someone asks you a difficult question, and instead of answering immediately, you pause. Just a second or two. In that brief space, your mind organizes thoughts, considers options, and chooses the best response. Now imagine handling every stressful situation with that same level of control. This is the power of slowing down. It is not about inaction. It is about choosing the right action. Most people rush through life without realizing it. They respond to emails immediately, make quick decisions under pressure, and speak before thinking. The modern world rewards speed. Fast responses are seen as competence. Quick action is mistaken for effectiveness. But speed without thought leads to mistakes. A hasty reply can escalate a conflict. A rushed decision can create unnecessary problems. Slowing down does not mean delaying action indefinitely. It means pausing just long enough to make better choices. The mind operates in two modes, automatic and deliberate. The automatic mind reacts instantly. It is fast but often inaccurate. The deliberate mind is slower, but it makes better decisions. Both are necessary. You do not need deep analysis to tie your shoes or answer basic questions. But for anything involving emotions, relationships, or significant decisions, the deliberate mind must take control. The problem is that people spend too much time in automatic mode. They answer out of habit rather than reflection. They react emotionally before considering the consequences. This is why slowing down is essential. It shifts control from impulse to intention. Slowing down starts with awareness. You cannot pause if you do not notice when you need to. The body provides signals: tension in the chest, a racing heart, clenched fists, or rapid speech. These are signs that the automatic mind is in control. The goal is to recognize these signals and introduce a pause. This can be as simple as taking a breath, mentally stepping back, or counting to 3 before speaking. A short pause creates enough space to shift from reaction to response. The greatest resistance to slowing down is the belief that everything is urgent. People feel pressure to answer immediately, to act without delay. But very few situations require instant action. A moment of silence in a conversation feels uncomfortable, but it often leads to a more thoughtful response. A short pause before sending a message can prevent unnecessary misunderstandings. A deep breath before reacting to criticism can turn an argument into a discussion. Slowing down does not mean losing time. It means using time wisely. Another resistance to slowing down is emotional intensity. When emotions are high, pausing feels unnatural. The brain wants immediate relief. If someone says something upsetting, reacting instantly provides a temporary release, but it often makes things worse. The key is training the mind to separate feeling from action. Just because something feels urgent does not mean it is. The emotion may be strong, but that does not mean the reaction should be. Pausing allows the emotional wave to pass before making a decision. This is how small frustrations stay small instead of turning into major conflicts. Slowing down is especially powerful in decision making. Many bad decisions happen because people feel rushed. They buy things they do not need, commit to things they do not want, and agree to things they later regret, all because they did not pause to think. A simple rule can prevent this: delay major decisions. If something is important, it deserves time. This does not mean overanalyzing every choice. It means giving yourself permission to reflect before committing. Even waiting an extra day before making a big decision can provide clarity. One of the best ways to practice slowing down is through silence. Most people fill silence with unnecessary words. They feel the need to respond immediately in conversations. But silence is powerful. It allows deeper thinking. It prevents misunderstandings. It creates space for better responses. Instead of rushing to fill every gap in conversation, allow pauses. Let others finish speaking before responding. Do not interrupt. The ability to sit in silence without discomfort is a sign of self-control. It shows confidence rather than insecurity. Slowing down also changes how people handle stress. Stress often comes from feeling overwhelmed, from believing that everything must be handled immediately. But slowing down helps separate what is truly urgent from what is simply loud. Not everything that demands attention deserves it. By taking a step back, it becomes clear what actually needs to be addressed and what can wait. This reduces unnecessary pressure and allows for more effective problem solving. A common argument against slowing down is that it wastes time. But time spent fixing mistakes made in haste is far greater than time spent thinking before acting. Consider how much energy is wasted on unnecessary arguments, poor decisions, and emotional overreactions. Slowing down prevents these problems before they start. It is not about doing less, it is about doing things better. Slowing down also improves relationships. Many conflicts are fueled by quick, emotional reactions. Someone says something insensitive, and instead of pausing to consider intent, the other person reacts defensively. This turns a minor issue into a major argument. But when people pause before responding, they give themselves a chance to understand rather than assume. They listen more, speak less, and communicate more effectively. This reduces misunderstandings and builds stronger connections. The ability to slow down is not something people are born with. It is a skill, and like any skill, it improves with practice. Start small. Introduce short pauses before speaking. Take a few deep breaths when emotions rise. Delay decisions when possible. Allow silence in conversations. Over time, these small habits become natural. The mind learns to move from automatic reaction to deliberate response. The more it is practiced, the easier it becomes. Slowing down does not mean losing momentum. It means directing energy wisely. It prevents unnecessary mistakes, improves relationships, and reduces stress. It creates space for clarity, thoughtfulness, and better decisions. It is not about inaction, it is about intentional action. And once it becomes a habit, life becomes smoother, more controlled, and far less chaotic. Part 3: Rewiring Thought Patterns. Imagine you are walking through a forest. There are two paths. One is wide, well trodden, and easy to follow, while the other is barely visible, covered in leaves and overgrown branches. The first path represents your automatic reactions, habits built over years of conditioning. The second path represents a new way of thinking, one that requires effort to establish but leads to better outcomes. Every time you choose the second path, it becomes clearer, easier to follow, and eventually it replaces the old route entirely. This is how thought patterns work. They are mental pathways, and the more you use them, the stronger they become. Most reactions are not conscious choices, but habits. The brain looks for patterns to save energy. If anger, frustration, or anxiety has been the default response in certain situations, the brain follows that path automatically. This is why people repeat the same mistakes, respond emotionally to minor issues, and feel trapped in cycles of stress. They are not making bad choices. They are simply following the mental paths that have been reinforced over time. But just as habits can be formed, they can also be changed. The first step to rewiring thought patterns is awareness. You cannot change what you do not notice. The goal is to catch reactive thoughts as they happen. This requires stepping back and observing the mind without immediately believing everything it says. Just because a thought appears does not mean it is true or helpful. Recognizing this creates space between thinking and action, allowing room for better responses. One of the most effective ways to rewire thought patterns is through questioning. The mind often runs on assumptions that have never been challenged. When something upsetting happens, the first thought might be, "This is unfair," or "This always happens to me." But is that really true? Could there be another way to see the situation? Questioning automatic thoughts weakens their hold. It forces the brain to slow down and reconsider, breaking the cycle of reactivity. Another key is reframing situations. The same event can be seen in different ways. A rejection can be viewed as failure or as redirection. A mistake can be seen as incompetence or as a lesson. A challenge can feel like a burden or an opportunity to grow. The situation does not change, but the way it is perceived does. The mind naturally focuses on threats and negativity because it is wired for survival. But with practice, it can be trained to look for solutions instead. Thought patterns are also shaped by language. The words used in the mind create emotional responses. Saying, "I have to do this," makes something feel like a burden, while saying, "I get to do this," shifts it into an opportunity. Saying, "This is impossible," closes the mind, while saying, "This is challenging but doable," keeps it open. Small changes in language create large shifts in perception. Negative self-talk reinforces fear and doubt, while intentional language builds resilience. Breaking reactive thought patterns also requires emotional regulation. Emotions are fuel for thoughts. When stressed, the mind amplifies problems. When calm, it sees solutions more clearly. The goal is not to eliminate emotions, but to manage them so they do not control thinking. Simple techniques like deep breathing, stepping away, or even writing down thoughts can prevent emotions from hijacking logic. When emotions settle, thinking becomes clearer, making it easier to choose responses rather than fall into old patterns. Environment also plays a role in shaping thought patterns. The brain absorbs the energy, language, and behaviors of those around it. Spending time in stressful, negative environments reinforces reactive thinking. Surrounding yourself with calm, rational, and solution-focused people strengthens better mental habits. Awareness of external influences allows for conscious choices about who and what gets attention. The process of rewiring thought patterns takes time. The brain does not change overnight. Every time a new response is chosen over an old reaction, the new path becomes stronger. At first, it requires effort. The old habits feel natural and the new ones feel forced. But with repetition, the new pathways become default. What once took conscious effort becomes automatic. Reactivity decreases, clarity increases, and situations that once triggered frustration or anxiety become manageable. Thoughts create reality. The way situations are interpreted determines the experience of them. Changing thought patterns does not mean ignoring problems or pretending everything is positive. It means developing the ability to see reality clearly without unnecessary emotional reactions. It means shifting from a mindset of helplessness to one of control. And it means choosing thoughts that serve rather than sabotage. The mind is powerful, and when directed with intention, it becomes the greatest tool for creating a calm, balanced, and resilient life. Part 4: Emotional Strength Through Mindful Response. Imagine someone you deeply respect, not because they are the loudest, not because they always have the last word, but because they remain composed no matter the situation. When others lose control, they stay grounded. When conflicts arise, they listen before speaking. They do not suppress their emotions, but they do not let emotions control them. This is not luck or personality. This is strength, the kind of strength that comes from mastering responses rather than being ruled by reactions. Emotional strength is not about being cold or detached. It is about being fully aware of emotions while choosing how to express them. Many people mistake emotional outbursts for power. They believe raising their voice, arguing, or reacting instantly gives them control. In reality, it is the opposite. The more someone reacts without thinking, the less control they have. True power comes from the ability to pause, assess, and respond with clarity. Reacting emotionally often feels right in the moment. It provides an immediate release, a sense of justification. But how often does it lead to the outcome you actually want? How often does anger bring understanding? How often does defensiveness lead to resolution? More often than not, reacting emotionally escalates problems instead of solving them. A single moment of impulse can damage relationships, create misunderstandings, and lead to regret. Yet, when emotions are managed with awareness, they become a tool rather than a weapon. Mindful response does not mean ignoring feelings. It means fully experiencing them without being controlled by them. It means recognizing when anger, frustration, or fear arises and choosing to act in a way that aligns with long-term goals rather than short-term impulses. It is the difference between sending an angry message immediately and waiting an hour to respond with perspective. It is the difference between snapping at someone in frustration and addressing the issue calmly when emotions settle. It is the difference between letting stress dictate actions and using awareness to navigate through it wisely. One of the most common triggers of emotional reactions is feeling misunderstood. When people feel unheard, disrespected, or misjudged, their first instinct is often to defend themselves. But reacting emotionally in these moments rarely leads to better understanding. Instead, it builds walls, fuels arguments, and makes resolution harder. The strongest response is not always the loudest one. It is the one that creates the most clarity. The ability to pause and communicate thoughtfully turns potential conflicts into opportunities for real connection. Another trigger is perceived unfairness. When something feels unjust, the instinct is to fight back immediately. But not every battle is worth fighting, and not every reaction brings justice. Responding with composure does not mean accepting mistreatment. It means choosing the response that leads to the best outcome. Sometimes that means speaking up. Other times it means walking away. The difference is intention rather than impulse. When emotions drive action, people often act against their own best interests. When awareness guides action, responses become powerful rather than destructive. Frustration and stress also push people into reactive patterns. The more pressure someone feels, the more likely they are to lash out, shut down, or make rash decisions. Stress narrows perception, making problems seem bigger and solutions seem smaller. In these moments, the greatest strength is not forcing action, but creating space for thought. Even a few deep breaths before responding can shift the entire direction of a conversation. Even a short walk before making a decision can prevent unnecessary mistakes. Emotional strength is not about suppressing stress, it is about managing it in a way that prevents it from dictating behavior. Developing mindful responses requires practice. It is not about perfection, but about progress. The first step is recognizing triggers. What situations push you toward emotional reactions? What patterns repeat in moments of stress? Awareness turns unconscious reactions into conscious choices. The second step is creating space between the trigger and the response. This does not mean avoiding issues, it means allowing emotions to settle before addressing them. The third step is choosing a response that aligns with long-term goals rather than immediate feelings. The right response is not always the easiest one in the moment, but it is always the one that leads to better outcomes. Over time, responding rather than reacting becomes natural. Situations that once caused anger or frustration no longer have the same power. Conversations that once led to conflict become opportunities for understanding. Stress that once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. This is not because the world changes, it is because the way you interact with it does. Emotional strength is not about being unaffected by life's challenges. It is about facing them with clarity, control, and confidence. And once you develop that strength, nothing can shake you the way it once did. Part 5, Becoming Unshakable. If two people face the same challenge, why does one stay calm while the other breaks down? The difference is not the situation itself, but how they process it. One sees it as a problem to solve, the other as a crisis. One steps back and assesses, the other reacts emotionally. The ability to stay composed under pressure is not luck or natural talent, it is a trained skill. And the more it is practiced, the stronger it becomes. Life will always present challenges. People will be difficult. Situations will be unfair. Unexpected problems will arise. None of this can be controlled. The only thing that can be controlled is how it is handled. Many people spend their lives trying to change external circumstances when the real solution is mastering internal responses. No amount of control over the outside world will ever replace the ability to control one's own mind. So, the unshakable mindset is built on a simple truth. Nothing has power over you unless you allow it. Situations may be difficult, but they do not force a reaction. People may be rude, but they do not control emotions. Stress may be present, but it does not have to dictate behavior. The moment this is understood, everything changes. Challenges stop feeling like personal attacks and start looking like opportunities to practice control. Difficult people stop being sources of frustration and start becoming exercises in patience. Stressful situations stop being overwhelming and start becoming reminders to slow down and think clearly. One of the strongest principles of the unshakable mindset is emotional ownership. No one else is responsible for your emotions. No one makes you angry. No one causes you stress. Emotions come from within, shaped by perception and thought patterns. The moment blame is placed on external forces, power is lost. But when emotions are owned, control is regained. Instead of saying that person made me angry, the response becomes, I felt anger, but I chose how to respond. Instead of saying that situation stressed me out, it becomes, I experienced stress, but I decided how to handle it. This shift removes dependency on others for peace of mind and places it where it belongs, within. Another principle of the unshakable mindset is detachment from outcomes. Many emotional reactions come from a desperate need for things to go a certain way. If a conversation does not go as planned, frustration arises. If an effort does not lead to the expected result, disappointment takes over. But control over results is an illusion. The only real control is over effort and response. When attachment to outcomes is removed, peace becomes possible. Actions are taken with full intention, but whatever happens afterward is handled with acceptance rather than emotional turmoil. This does not mean becoming passive, it means being fully engaged in the process while letting go of what cannot be controlled. Another key to becoming unshakable is setting strong boundaries. Many people struggle with emotional stability because they allow external forces too much influence over their well-being. They tolerate unnecessary drama, engage in arguments that serve no purpose, and take on responsibilities that are not theirs. Boundaries are not about shutting people out. They are about protecting mental energy. Saying no to unnecessary stress is an act of self-respect. Choosing not to engage in every conflict is an act of wisdom. Not everything deserves attention, and recognizing this is a crucial step toward maintaining inner balance. Training the mind to remain calm does not mean suppressing emotion. It means developing the ability to experience emotion fully without letting it dictate behavior. Anger can be acknowledged without turning into aggression. Sadness can be felt without leading to despair. Fear can exist without controlling actions. The goal is not emotional numbness, it is emotional clarity. Instead of being overwhelmed by feelings, they are observed, understood, and handled with awareness. This level of control is built through daily practice. The small moments matter. Each time patience is chosen over frustration, the habit of calmness is strengthened. Each time a pause is taken before reacting, the power of awareness grows. Each time a situation is approached with logic rather than emotion, the unshakable mindset becomes stronger. Over time, this becomes second nature. Problems that once seemed overwhelming become manageable. Situations that once triggered emotional reactions lose their power. Life does not become easier, but the ability to handle it improves. An unshakable mind is not one that avoids difficulties. It is one that faces them with confidence. It does not seek control over everything, but finds control in its own responses. It does not chase external validation, but builds internal stability. This is the ultimate power, not to control the world, but to remain steady no matter what it brings. Conclusion: the power of presence. The ability to respond rather than react changes everything. It creates better decisions, stronger relationships, and a sense of peace that is not dependent on external circumstances. It turns stress into growth, conflict into understanding, and challenges into opportunities. It is not about never feeling emotion. It is about knowing that emotions do not control actions. The journey toward calmness does not require perfection, it requires practice. Each moment is an opportunity to train the mind. Each challenge is a chance to reinforce control. The more it is practiced, the easier it becomes. The reactive mind is a habit, but so is the calm mind. The choice is always available, and the more it is chosen, the stronger it grows. Calm is power. It is not weakness. It is not avoidance. It is the highest form of strength. And once it becomes a way of life, nothing can shake it.